How do you pick a security camera today? There are hundreds of models and they all have wildly different prices. So to help with that, I'm going to compare a $35 smart security camera to one that costs $180. I'm going to uncover some secrets about these cameras and I'll give you my advice on whether it's worth it to spend the extra. So let's get it. The two cameras we're going to compare today are on the desk, and I'll let you know later what model they are and where you can buy them, although you can guess down in the comments below. But I've had both of these for over a month, with actually the more expensive model being in my home for 6 months now. To get you caught up, I'm going to start with a basic intro of these two. Our budget camera gives you 2K resolution, a 140-degree field of view, a spotlight for color night vision, or infrared lights for black and white night vision. The camera can connect to Apple HomeKit, Samsung SmartThings, Amazon, Google, and of course the manufacturer's app. This is all done through a Wi-Fi 6 connection, which is impressive at this price point. However, that Wi-Fi is only 2.4 gigahertz. More on that in a bit. Our more expensive camera gives you 4K resolution, a 133-degree field of view, an adjustable spotlight for color night vision, but no infrared lights. The camera can connect to all of the same apps as the budget version, but there are two versions of this camera, with one connecting to Wi-Fi at 2.4 or 5 gigahertz, and another, this version here, using power over Ethernet, which is a wired method for connecting to your home's network. Now that you're caught up on the basics, let's talk differences. Here are some visuals directly comparing these two cameras. Truthfully, on a daily basis, these two are going to look very similar on your phone. However, when we download full resolution footage and have a look at them on a larger screen, there are differences. During the day, the differences are fairly hard to see. Here's a couple of moments of strong backlighting. That situation can sometimes provide a major issue for cameras like these. And you can see in our results that the backlighting does affect our budget camera a little more. But at dusk and in the evening, that's where differences really show up. When we look at the more expensive camera's footage, what you're seeing is more light getting into the image. This is due to some hardware specifications, like the aperture. The differences allow the more expensive camera to show more detail and to provide clearer images, even when there's very little light to be had. In the end, that means you get footage where you can actually identify things going on. And in the case of smart security cameras, when it's a low light situation, we actually see them drop in frames per second. In fact, when you go to a black and white night vision, most security cameras drop to between 10 and 15 frames per second. That won't happen as often with the more expensive camera, as it can take in all that extra light. That ends up meaning it stays at the 20 frames per second, which in turn means people or objects moving quickly are going to be easier to make out. You also have double the resolution, moving from 2K to 4K, but that actually means you have 4 times the pixels in every frame of video. That's a massive jump, especially combined with a similar field of view. So there are major upgrades when we talk about the day-to-day visuals. However, in 2025, a budget camera like this, we're still talking about specifications that are excellent and footage that is great. There are ways to mitigate the differences here, and I'll talk about that a little later in the video. Now, one of the big benefits of smart security cameras is that they can detect different types of events. Both cameras are able to detect very similar types of events, and both of them are relatively good at determining what's in front of the camera and then reporting that to you. I will tell you that based on the motion sensor and some of the other components, that the more expensive camera does pick up more events that are further away. For example, I set these cameras up in front of my house and the more expensive one picked up vehicle events further out, whereas Our budget option didn't because the motion sensor wasn't triggered. But in general, they work, and the company that designed these is using very similar methods to determine that there's a package or an animal or a person in front of the camera. Where things get really different for you is in the speed and in the cost. The more expensive camera has a significant amount of processing power on board. This is one of the reasons it's bigger, because the company has housed additional components for this. That local processing power is used to determine what's in front of the camera instead of what the budget camera has to do. The budget camera can identify that there's something moving in front of it, and in some cases it can figure out what that is. For example, this specific model can figure out that there's motion and or a person in front of it. But if you want it to detect a vehicle or animal or a package, it has to use cloud services. So it basically has to send the image out to the company's cloud servers. That uses your Wi-Fi and your internet connection, and then it has to come back with a verification that yes, there's an animal in front of the camera. That can create delays in terms of you getting notifications, and it can mean less reliability for you. If your internet is down, it's not gonna work, and you may or may not get a recording of the scene. It also could cost you big money because the company has to maintain cloud servers and its services to do this. That means they charge you a subscription fee. And it means in just a year of paying for that, you could potentially pay for the cost of the more expensive camera. The subscriptions usually give you an option to store the footage from the camera on the manufacturer's cloud service too, so there are extra benefits, but this is one of the ways that the two cameras end up very close. Both cameras have that cloud option where they can store your footage on the company's servers, but both cameras also have an onboard storage option. Personally, I like the budget cameras option of a micro SD card. They are inexpensive and replaceable, whereas the onboard storage for the more expensive camera could someday fail and you could be left without a camera in some scenarios. Now, both cameras also have an option to send footage to an in-home network attached storage, or NAS. This is especially uncommon at the price point of our budget camera, but this is very important because it would mean you get your footage far away from the camera physically. And if the camera's ever stolen, you still have the footage. And finally, both cameras can stream their footage using what's called RTSP. Those of you who use a smart home platform like Home Assistant will be very excited by that idea, as it means you're able to use the cameras with that service. And both of these cameras can continuously record 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's a very important component. But here we are learning that these two cameras are very similar when it comes to storage options. I consult with people to help them build out smart homes, and that's on our website if you're interested. But I would say about half of the conversations I have are about Wi-Fi and home networks. It's a pain point, and it's often because of simple things like the differences between these two cameras. Now, as I said earlier in the video, our more expensive camera has both a Wi-Fi version and a PoE version. You pick which one you want when you buy. My version is a PoE camera, which means it's wired into my home network. If I was to wire in 10 of these cameras in my home, I could potentially have to upgrade a network switch or something, but it would work pretty well. If I was to buy the Wi-Fi version of this camera and connect 10 of them to my 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, it would probably still work just fine. I might run into some reliability issues, and certainly it's a little more difficult to get 5 gigahertz everywhere. But if I was to connect 10 of these budget cameras to my 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, it probably would not go well. And it could slow down not just these cameras, but a number of other devices. It's not that having a few of these on your Wi-Fi is a problem. It's when we go out and we add a number of streaming devices to that 2.4 gigahertz. It just can't handle as much bandwidth as 5 gigahertz. I don't want to explain all the details because we'd be here for a while, but I do have a video linked below that talks about this and explains it in detail. You'll learn a ton about Wi-Fi, and in turn, we'll be able to make your network work for you. There are a couple of other big differences that may or may not apply to you. The more expensive camera is actually a smart home hub. That's the other reason that it is physically larger than the budget camera. It means you can actually run a lot of automations directly on this, and you can connect other devices from the manufacturer directly to this and basically build your own smart home here. There are also differences in the settings, and in general, when you buy a more expensive camera, you are getting a little more control over the detections, the recording settings, and of course, the footage. A good example here is the spotlight on the more expensive camera has brightness control. Our detections also have more settings to fine tune those recordings that we want. So now you have some of the insight into the ways that camera manufacturers pack in features and why sometimes you end up with a bigger price tag. So let me get to a recommendation for you. It's time for the big reveal. Now, both of these cameras are from a company called Aqara, and I've recommended a lot of these cameras to a lot of people. They have good quality products and very reasonable prices. The budget camera is called the G100, and the G5 Pro is our more expensive model. It was released earlier this year. I think it's important to understand that Aqara packs in a lot of features over and above some other smart home cameras, and I use these two here for that reason specifically. We could talk about the incredible aperture on the G5 Pro, we could talk about the different detection, but if I was picking one today, which would I choose? I'm using the G5 Pro in my garage to protect many of our valuables there. It's a detached garage, so it is far away from our home, but I was able to wire it in with that PoE option. I can get the footage all the way to my NAS in my home immediately, and the incredible specifications on this mean the dark garage isn't really affecting the quality of my recordings. I have that local recognition and detection. It means I'm getting those recordings instantly, and I can even do 24/7 recording in the evenings when we're asleep. It's also a smart home hub, so I can actually run some automations out there. Those are all the reasons I love it, and I wouldn't replace it with a single G100. However, putting two G100s in this same situation could cover a garage really well. They would have to cover half the square footage, and I would need to manage the lighting situation a little. Maybe add a couple of lights to my space, use the spotlights here, and that would ensure I was getting good visuals all the time. With those two things managed, this will do 90% of what the more expensive camera can do. So I think for a lot of people, it's gonna make sense to spend less. The big caveat to this is that 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi connection, but in my experience, most people can put 4 or 5 of these types of cameras, as long as they're not looking at them all the time on their 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. It likely won't have any impact. But if you're trying to stream a bunch of them at the same time, most people will run into problems. The links for both of these cameras are down below, and that Wi-Fi video is right there. Also, if you're looking for a deeper understanding of smart home cameras, here are our favorite models over the last 2 years. Otherwise, thanks for watching today, and of course, live smart. I said a lot of stuff. See ya.